welcome back to the Johnny Gets Cash YouTube channel. Today I'll be showing you my latest purchase, which is this, a 2008 Honda CRV. Now I bought this Honda in auction recently. It's a 2008 and it's done just over 120,000 miles. Outside, it's as you'd expect for a 15-year-old vehicle. The paint is pretty hazy and dull, but that's because it's never had a proper clean or a detail, I would imagine. I can sort all of that out and make this car look as good as new, I'm confident. Inside, there's no major damage to speak of, there's no particularly horrible smells, it's just a little bit dirty. Again, needs a bit of a freshen up. Easy work. Where I am going to add value to this vehicle, however, is the knocking suspension. Now, I believe that's just bushes, so not the end of the world, pretty easy to sort out. The mystery, however, is that rear diff. I drove this car back from the auctions, which is about 60 or 70 miles. It drove absolutely beautifully, not a single complaint with it at all. However, after getting it nice and warm, as soon as I got back to my yard, put it on full lock to pull in, and there's a knock from the rear diff. Now what's odd about that is, when the car is cold, i.e. when the rear diff fluid hasn't warmed up, you can do full lock circles and it doesn't make any noise whatsoever. So I believe that means when the fluid in the diff is cool and therefore thicker, it's fine, it's doing its job, no noises. When it's warmed up and that fluid is thinned out a little, it starts to knock and make those familiar diff sounds. I'm going to take a punt and say that could be just the diff fluid wanting replacing, because I'm aware that on these Honda CRVs, if that fluid isn't changed every 30 to 40,000 miles, it can degrade and therefore cause some unsettling noises from the rear diff. So the first job is to drive this car again, get it nice and warm, do some full lock circles and see if that diff still makes noise. As I say, I tested it earlier from cold and it was fine, no noise at all. So I'll warm it up now. If when it's warm that diff still makes noise, fine, I'm going to say it's fluid. I'll drop that fluid out. I'll change it for some genuine Honda product. Then we'll try again. Hopefully that will solve the issue. Worst case, it's going to be a new diff. Hopefully it won't come to that. If that does solve it, I'll move on to the suspension bushes. As I say, the car drives absolutely perfectly. It's just those few little noises from underneath that I need to solve. When all that is done, it's time to start making this CRV as pretty as the day it left the showroom. So I'm going to carry on with my test drive, get this thing nice and warm, and then join me again in a minute and we'll see if that diff is still making noise. Okay then, you join me a little bit later on that test drive. The car is now up to temperature, including that rear diff, and it has started making the noise again. If you listen carefully, when I turn a sharp corner, you may just hear the noise I'm talking about. So in case you didn't hear it just now, I'm going to go from stationary, not quite full lock, but pretty much. If you listen, you should hear that rear diff noise. Okay, so you saw me take that wheel off. Here's a little update though. Typical of an old car. I wanted to change the anti-roll bar bushes because obviously that suspension knock from the front, something needs to change. I thought, start with the easy stuff, do the anti-roll bar bushes, no problem. Well, the issue that we have is the two bolts that hold the bush itself down. Taking those out as sympathetically as I could, they still both sheared off. So, okay, no problem. The control arms have to come off. If I take those off, I can drill out those snap bolts and replace them. But I'm thinking to myself, if I'm doing this, I might as well just scrap this old control arm, this wishbone. I'll do both sides. This may only be a cheap car, but at the end of the day, if someone's going to be parting with their hard-earned cash for it, and I'm going to be selling it to them, it has to be right. So, in my opinion, I will obviously put new bushes in on the anti-roll bar, but I'm going to change both wishbones as well. Why wouldn't I? I mean, as I say, it is a cheap car, but it's got to be right. If I change the wishbones, you know, all the rubbers, everything will come with it. Everything will be fresh. It should hopefully solve that suspension knock, and I know it will be proper. And I think that's the important thing. Again, it's only a cheap car, but it's got to be right. So as you can see, that near side control arm came out easily, offside not so much. This bushing was so seized that I basically had to get the 9-inch out, cut it off. A lot of messing around getting that arm out, but it does go to show that these arms really could do with changing, so I'm pleased I made that decision. As mentioned before, I want this truck to be right, and I don't want anyone to have any complaints when they buy it, so onwards and upwards. So you're joining me a little bit later on after the rear diff fluid has been changed and those two front lower arms also been changed. The car is still cold at the moment, so I want to test drive to try and warm that diff up to make sure that it's not making any noise. If that solves the problem, great. As suspected, it was degraded fluid. Now the fluid that came out of the diff did look pretty grotty, pretty dark. So I am pretty confident that will be the case, but of course I have to get it up to temperature and give it a proper test before I can categorically say that problem is solved. Now the other issue I was working on was the knocking from the suspension. Well, as explained briefly in the video, I was going to start with easy things, just change the anti-roll bar bushes. Doing that, the bolts that hold the anti-roll bar bushings in place sheared off, despite me being as careful as possible. Now I could have just taken the arms off and dealt with the snapped bolts, but looking at the bushes that are already in and on those lower arms, it made sense to completely change them, get all the relevant bushes that are on there replaced at the same time, and make sure everything there was brand new and fresh. As it turned out, the offside lower arm was an absolute nightmare to change. I had to basically get a 9-inch on it and cut it off in places, so I couldn't have saved that one anyway, but no matter, because I'm glad I've changed both arms. Now, in terms of road noise when driving, at the moment I would say that has vastly helped with the road noise. I can't hear any knocking from the suspension anymore. So I'm going to say that is problem solved. Obviously I am test driving on a normal road, it's relatively smooth. I'll try and do a few tests off-road and see how it sounds. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So far, let's say this car owed me a little over £1,500 after fees straight from the auction. The fluid in the rear diff, that's around £30. The lower arms and the bushes in the front, I've probably spent, not a lot actually, less than £150 on all those bits and pieces. So total price, this thing is still well under £2,000 to me, and I do believe this is a £3,000 vehicle all day long. I mean, in this part of the world, this will sell quickly. I believe it will sell well. 120,000 miles, £3,000 would make that a cheap example. So I believe it will sell quickly. Obviously, I still have to tackle the curb appeal, let's say, of the car. Outside, as described, paint is still very, very hazy and disgusting. Inside, yeah, it's fine, just a little bit dirty. So now that the dirty mechanical bits are done, I can get on with making this thing look a little bit pretty. So I'll come back to you in a minute when I've got this thing up to temperature and let you know if that diff's making any noise. After that, you'll catch me doing the freshen up and the pretty up of this thing, ready to get it photographed and sold. Okay, so the car is now up to temperature. I've been driving for a few miles. I'm going to do some tight maneuvers here just to see if that rear diff does make any noise. I'm in a car park, so don't worry about traffic. So far, so good. I'm going to try the other way. Make sure there's no noise. And so far, so good. The diff seems to be absolutely silent. So I am going to say that fluid change has done the trick, and that's job done.
With the finishing touches now complete, this Honda CRV is ready to find its new home. That scratched, hazy and tired black paint is now gleaming like the day it left the showroom in 2008. Underneath, the rear diff is now silently back to doing its job without any issues. The mystery suspension knock has been solved with new wishbones, bushes and track rod ends that are fitted off camera. In addition to these jobs, the CRV has also been into a local independent garage to have a full once over and health check ahead of being advertised, so this one really is ready to go. If you've enjoyed seeing this old car be brought back to its best and want to see more videos like it, make sure you like this video, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe. Thanks for watching, until next time, cheers.